Once, in the quiet town of O'Reilly, two families' friends lived side by side, their lives starkly different. The Peters were the envy of the neighbourhood, a couple bound by love, trust and respect. Their home was filled with laughter, the aroma of home-cooked meals, and their unity was a symbol of hope. The Raymonds, however, were the opposite. Their house was a war zone, echoing with shouts and curses. Mr. Ray was a bitter man, and his wife, Joy, had long since stopped trying to fight for peace. Their children cowered in fear, their home a place of hostility rather than warmth. Mr. Ray watched the Peters with burning resentment. Each time he saw them walk hand in hand, each time he heard them laugh, his hatred deepened. His own marriage was a prison, and he couldn't stand the sight of their happiness. "If I can't have peace, neither will they," he muttered one evening, an idea forming in his mind. One evening, as Mrs. Peter stepped outside to tend to her small garden, Mr. Raymond approached, his face filled with concern. "Sister, I don't know how to tell you this, but I must, because you've been a good person to me." Mrs. Peter wiped her hands and looked at him curiously. "What is it, Mr. Ray?" He sighed, lowering his voice. "It's about your husband. I overheard him speaking to Baba Alado late last night while I was passing through his house, something about a money ritual sacrifice." Her heart skipped a beat. "Money ritual?" "Yes, and the worst part..." He hesitated, making sure to glance around as if afraid someone would hear. "The person he plans to use is you." Mrs. Peter took a step back, shaking her head. "No, that's not possible. My husband loves me." "I thought so too," he said solemnly. "But the world is a wicked place, my sister. A man can change at any time. Listen, I heard Baba Alado telling him an abomination that must not happen if the ritual is to succeed. Tonight, place 3 small stones under his pillow. It will nullify the ritual, and he will fail." Mrs. Peter trembled, doubt creeping in. Could it be true? Could the man she loved so deeply be planning to harm her? Out of fear, she agreed. Later that night, Mr. Raymond found Mr. Peter walking home from work. He pulled him aside, his expression grave. "My friend, I have something disturbing to tell you. We men should always have each other's back." Mr. Peter frowned. "What is it?" "It's your wife. I saw her today sneaking into a witch doctor's hut. She did not see me, so I followed her and I overheard their discussion. She is planning to use your head in order to make you a zombie so she could turn herself to the head of the house." Mr. Peter's chest tightened. "That's impossible. My wife would never..." "I'm only telling you this because of the bond between us as friends. Check under your pillow tonight," Mr. Raymond interrupted. "If you find 3 stones there, you will know I'm telling the truth." A seed of doubt took root in Mr. Peter's heart. His wife had never given him reason to suspect her. But why would Mr. Raymond lie? They've been friends for ages. He nodded and thanked his friend. That night, as Mrs. Peter prepared for the bed, her hands shook as she slid 3 small stones under her husband's pillow. On the other side of the room, Mr. Peter, pretending to be asleep, waited anxiously. At midnight, he carefully lifted his pillow. 3 smooth stones lay beneath it. A chill ran through him. His heart pounded like a war drum. "It's true." He turned to his wife, his voice low and menacing. "So you really planned to do it?" Mrs. Peter sat upright. "What do you mean?" "You planned to use my head," he roared. Mrs. Peter gasped. "I did no such thing. I only placed the stones to stop you from harming me." "Stop me?" He laughed bitterly. "You're the one who went to a witch doctor. You wanted to take my destiny." Confusion turned to terror. How did he know about the stones? Accusations flew, voices rose, and the house that once echoed with love now trembled with fury. And outside, in the shadows, Mr. Raymond watched, his lips curled into a victorious smile. Days passed, and the Peters grew distant. But something gnawed at Mrs. Peters. Why would Mr. Raymond know so much? Determined, she visited her parents. After explaining the events, her father looked at her solemnly. "My dear, you have been played. The man who warned you and your husband is the true enemy." "Your father is right," her mother added. Mrs. Peters' blood ran cold. "But why would Mr. Raymond do something like that?" "You could see he wants your home to be chaotic, just like his," her mother said. "Now that you know the truth, you and your husband know what to do," said her father. She rushed home, only to find her husband sitting in the dimly lit room, staring blankly at the wall. He looked up as she entered. "We have been deceived," she said breathlessly. "I know," he admitted. "I confronted the witch doctor today. He said he had never seen you." Their eyes met, realization sinking in. They had almost destroyed their love because of a lie. With renewed resolve, the Peters stormed into the Rays' home. "Why did you do it?" Mr. Peter demanded, his voice filled with controlled fury. Mr. Raymond feigned innocence. "I only told you what I heard." "You lied to us," Mrs. Peter interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "You planted deceit in our home. You wanted us to suffer like you do." For a moment, Mr. Raymond said nothing. Then he laughed bitterly. "And so what if I did? You think you're better than us. You flaunt your love while my house is in shambles. I wanted to prove that no marriage is perfect." Disgusted, Mr. Peter stepped closer. "No marriage is perfect, but love, trust, and communication make it strong. You failed in your own home, so you wanted to ruin ours." Mr. Raymond sneered. "You figured it out too late. At least I got to watch your happy home burn." "No, you didn't," Mrs. Peter said firmly. "You only made us stronger." Hand in hand, the Peters left the house, reclaiming their love from the ashes of deceit. Days after Mr. Raymond's deception was exposed, his world continued to crumble. The town whispered about him in hushed tones, neighbours avoided him, and even his own children seemed to shrink away from his presence. But the final blow was yet to come. One evening, as he stormed into his house, slamming the door behind him, he found Joy sitting at the dining table. In front of her was a single brown envelope. He frowned. "What's this?" Joy lifted her eyes to his, her face devoid of emotion. "Divorce papers." A silence heavier than stone filled the room. Mr. Raymond's chest tightened. "What kind of joke is this?" he barked, though his voice wavered slightly. "It's not a joke." Joy's voice was steady, firm. "I've tolerated your wickedness for too long. I was blind, but now see you for what you're, a miserable man who thrives on destruction, and I refuse to let you destroy me any further." He scoffed, shaking his head. "So because of those useless Peters, you think you can leave me?" "No," she said sharply, rising to her feet. "I'm leaving you because of you, because I have spent years being your prisoner, because I have watched you tear people down just to feel powerful, because I refuse to live another day in a house where love has been replaced with fear." She pushed the papers toward him. "Sign them." Mr. Raymond's hands clenched into fists. "I won't." Joy let out a small, humourless laugh. "Then don't. But whether you sign them or not, I am leaving. I am taking the children and I am walking away from this nightmare." Panic flickered across his face. "You can't take my children away from me. Watch me." She picked up a second envelope and tossed it at him. "That's a restraining order. And considering the evidence of your lies, your manipulation, and your abuse, the court will favour me." His breathing grew heavy. He knew it was true. For years, he had ruled his home with fear, certain that Joy would never leave, that she was too weak to stand against him. But now, standing before him, she was no longer the timid woman who had once cowered in his shadow. She was free. And as she walked past him, her voice was calm but final. "I hope you enjoy the loneliness you've created." Then she was gone. And for the first time in his life, Mr. Raymond truly understood what it meant to lose. The end.